In 2004, a father and his teenage son checked into a Las Vegas hotel for a weekend getaway. 3 days later, hotel staff discovered their room abandoned, belongings untouched, beds never slept in. Security footage showed them entering the elevator on the first night. They were never seen leaving. For 20 years, their disappearance remained one of Vegas's most baffling mysteries. But when demolition crews began tearing down the old hotel wing in 2094, they found something hidden behind the walls, something that would finally explain where Marcus and Tyler Brennan went that night and why no one could find them. If you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries and stories that defy explanation, subscribe now, because this case will challenge everything you think you know about what can happen in plain sight. The desert wind carried dust across the Las Vegas Strip as Elena Brennan stood behind the chain-link fence, watching the excavator's mechanical arm swing toward the crumbling facade of what had once been the Venetian Palace Hotel. The building had closed 5 years ago, left to decay, while developers fought over the property in endless litigation. Now, finally, it was coming down. Elena pressed her fingers against the cold metal fence, her eyes tracking the destruction of the place that had swallowed her family whole. 20 years, 2 decades of searching, of calling police departments and hiring private investigators, of distributing flyers with Marcus's kind smile and Tyler's adolescent grin. 2 decades of anniversaries, marked not with celebrations, but with renewed pleas on local news stations that no longer cared about a cold case from 2004. The excavator's arm punched through a section of the 3rd floor, and Elena flinched despite the distance. Somewhere in that building, in those rooms and corridors she had walked 1,000 times in her nightmares, lay the answer to what happened on October 15, 2004. She had been certain of it for years, but the hotel's owners had refused extensive searches, citing business concerns and the lack of probable cause. The police had searched the immediate area, of course, but they had found nothing, no bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle, just an empty hotel room with 2 packed suitcases, 2 untouched beds, and a silence that had echoed through Elena's life ever since. A construction worker shouted something, and the excavator stopped mid-swing. Elena straightened, her heart suddenly pounding. Even from this distance, she could see the cluster of workers gathering, pointing at something in the building's exposed interior. One pulled out a phone. Another began gesturing urgently. Elena's hands tightened on the fence until her knuckles went white. After 20 years of waiting, of wondering, of waking up each morning to the same unanswered questions, something had finally changed. She didn't know yet if what they had found would bring closure or unleash a new horror. But as she watched the construction site erupt into controlled chaos, Elena Brennan knew with absolute certainty that her long vigil was about to end. The only question was whether she was ready for the truth. Elena had always hated October. Even before 2004, before the Venetian Palace, before everything fell apart, there had been something about the month that unsettled her. The way summer died slowly in the desert, temperatures dropping, but never quite committing to autumn. The way the light changed, turning golden, and then amber, and then that particular shade of orange that made everything look like it was already a memory. She sat in her small apartment in Henderson, 20 minutes from the Strip, surrounded by the archive of her obsession. Boxes lined every wall, each labeled with years and categories. Police reports 2004-2008, private investigator files, hotel records, media coverage, witness statements. Her entire life had contracted to fit inside these cardboard containers. As if by organizing the evidence, she could somehow organize the chaos that had consumed her. The television played on mute, local news cycling through the usual stories. Elena barely watched anymore, but she kept it on out of habit, the way some people needed white noise to feel less alone. She was reviewing the file she had reviewed 1,000 times before. The initial police report from October the 18th, 2004. 3 days after Marcus and Tyler had checked into room 1247 at the Venetian Palace, her fingers traced the familiar words. Subjects Marcus Brennan, age 41, and Tyler Brennan, age 15, reported missing by spouse Elena Brennan. Last confirmed sighting, October 15, 2004, approximately 8:47 p.m. Hotel security footage shows subjects entering elevator on ground floor. Subjects did not exit through any monitored entrance. Room found secure. Belongings undisturbed. No signs of foul play. No signs of foul play. The phrase that had haunted her for 2 decades. As if the absence of blood meant the absence of horror. As if people could simply evaporate without leaving behind evidence of their terror. Elena closed the file and crossed to the window. The strip glowed in the distance, that manufactured paradise built on the bones of the desert. Marcus had loved Vegas, had insisted on bringing Tyler for his 16th birthday, even though Elena had wanted something quieter, more meaningful. A camping trip maybe, or a tour of the Grand Canyon. But Marcus had that enthusiasm that was impossible to resist, that certainty that life should be celebrated loudly. "It's Vegas, babe," he had said, wrapping his arms around her waist as they stood in their kitchen in Phoenix. "Shows, restaurants, maybe catch a magic act. Tyler will love it. Come with us." But she had declined. A presentation at work, she had told him, too important to reschedule. The truth was messier. She had been angry about something trivial, one of those small marital grievances that seem monumental in the moment and impossibly stupid in hindsight. Marcus had left the toilet seat up, or forgotten to call when he said he would, or made some joke that had landed wrong. She couldn't even remember now what had sparked it, so she had let them go without her. Let them drive the 5 hours to Vegas, in Marcus's pride and joy. The restored 1967 Mustang he had worked on for years. Let them check into the Venetian Palace and head out for dinner at some steakhouse Tyler had picked. Let them disappear into whatever nightmare had been waiting. The phone rang, startling her from the familiar spiral of guilt. She checked the caller ID. Detective Sarah Ortiz, LVMPD Cold Case Unit. Elena's heart kicked against her ribs as she answered. "Mrs. Brennan, I need you to come to the old Venetian Palace site, immediately." Ortiz's voice was tight, controlled in the way people sound when they're trying not to alarm you while delivering alarming news. "The demolition crew has found something." Elena grabbed her keys with shaking hands, not bothering to ask what they had found. She had learned long ago that the answers given over the phone were never the whole truth. She needed to see for herself. The drive to the Strip felt both endless and instantaneous, traffic flowing around her like water around a stone. She parked in a loading zone, not caring about tickets or towing. The construction site was now ringed with police vehicles, their lights painting the dusk in alternating blue and red. Detective Ortiz met her at the fence line. The detective was younger than Elena, probably mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and eyes that had already seen too much. She had taken over the case 3 years ago, when the previous detective retired, and unlike her predecessor, Ortiz seemed to actually care. "Mrs. Brennan," Ortiz said, her voice gentler now. "Before we go in, I need to prepare you. What we found is disturbing." Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Her entire body felt like it was vibrating, at a frequency just below perception. Ortiz led her through the fence and across the debris-scattered ground. Workers stood in small clusters, their faces pale beneath construction dust. They stopped at the edge of a massive hole where the excavator had torn through to the building's interior. Portable lights had been set up, illuminating a section of exposed wall on what had once been the third floor. The building had a renovation in 1998, Ortiz explained. They closed off several sections of hallway, created new room configurations. This created dead spaces between the old walls and new ones, gaps that shouldn't exist on any floor plan. She gestured to where crime scene technicians were carefully working. Between two walls, in a space perhaps 3 feet wide, Elena could see what looked like a small room. Not a gap, but an intentional space. There was a mattress, filthy and decomposed, empty water bottles, and along one wall, scratch marks that could only have been made by human fingernails, deep gouges in the drywall that spoke of desperate, sustained effort. "We found personal items," Ortiz continued quietly. "A wallet, driver's license for Marcus Brennan, and a class ring from Desert Vista High School with the initials TB. Elena's knees buckled. Ortiz caught her, held her upright, but Elena barely felt the detective's hands. She stared at that hidden room, at the evidence of captivity and suffering, and finally understood. They hadn't left the hotel. They had never had the chance to leave. "There's more," Ortiz said, and something in her voice made Elena look away from the wall. "We found a camera, hidden in the ventilation, still recording to an old hard drive." She paused. "Mrs. Brennan, someone was watching, and we need to figure out who." The command center had been set up in a construction trailer at the edge of the site. Fluorescent lights harsh against the gathering darkness outside. Elena sat in a folding chair, a blanket someone had draped over her shoulders. Though she wasn't cold, she was beyond temperature, beyond physical sensation. Every nerve in her body seemed to have shut down in the face of what she had learned. They had been there. All this time, Marcus and Tyler had been inside those walls, while she walked the strip distributing flyers, while she sat in police stations filing reports, while the city's neon lights blazed and tourists laughed, and life continued in the most obscene way possible. Detective Ortiz sat across from her, a laptop open on the folding table between them. "The hard drive is old," she explained. "Early 2000s technology. Our tech team is working on recovering the footage, but the equipment is degraded. It's going to take time." "How long were they in there?" Elena asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and mechanical. Ortiz's expression tightened. "The medical examiner will need to make that determination. But based on the evidence we've found, the water bottles, She hesitated. "The amount of scratch marks suggests they were alive for some time, after they disappeared. Days," Elena thought, "or weeks, trapped in darkness, knowing no one could hear them scream." She felt bile rise in her throat and forced it down. "The space was soundproofed," Ortiz continued. "Whoever created it knew what they were doing. The walls were reinforced. There's evidence of a ventilation system that's separate from the hotel's main HVAC. This wasn't opportunistic, Mrs. Brennan. This was planned." Elena looked up sharply. "You think they were targeted? Marcus and Tyler specifically?" "We don't know yet, but this level of preparation suggests the perpetrator had been planning something like this for a while. They would have needed access to the building during renovation, knowledge of the floor plans, technical expertise." Ortiz pulled out a file folder. "I've requisitioned all employment records from the Venetian Palace, particularly focusing on 1998 renovation staff and 2004 hotel employees." The door to the trailer opened, and a younger officer entered, carrying an evidence bag. "Detective, we've recovered more items from the space. Thought you'd want to see these." Through the clear plastic, Elena could see a small notebook, its pages yellowed and warped, and what looked like a pen. Her breath caught. Is that Tyler's handwriting? Ortiz carefully removed the notebook from the bag, handling it with gloved hands. She opened it slowly, angling it so Elena could see. The pages were covered in handwriting that was achingly familiar. Tyler's careful print that he had never fully abandoned for cursive. Day 1. The first entry read, "Dad says to stay calm. We're going to be rescued. Someone will notice we're missing. Mom will notice." Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, tears finally breaking through the shock. Tyler had believed she would save them, had counted on her. He documented everything, Ortiz said softly, turning pages. When they woke up in the space, initially drugged, how they tried to get out, the person who brought them food and water. She stopped at a particular page. Mrs. Brennan. Tyler wrote descriptions, physical details of their captor. Elena leaned forward, forcing herself to read through the tears distorting her vision. Male, 30s maybe? Hard to tell with the mask. Medium height. Tattoo on left forearm. Looks like a compass or clock face. Spoke with an accent, southern maybe? Called Dad Mr. Brennan like he knew him. Day 12. 12 days. They had survived at least 12 days in that hellish space. The entries stop at day 18, Ortiz said, her voice heavy with the implications. The last entry is different, more desperate. She turned to the final written page. Tyler's handwriting had deteriorated, letters slanting and uneven. Dad is getting worse. The infection in his hand is spreading. He can't stop shivering. The man hasn't come in 3 days. I think he's going to let us die here. Mom, if you ever find this, please know we fought. We didn't give up. Dad kept saying you'd find us. He believed in you, until the end. I love you. I'm sorry we went without you. Tyler. The room swam around Elena. She felt Ortiz's hand on her shoulder, heard the detective's voice from very far away, saying something about water, about taking a break. But Elena couldn't look away from her son's last words, couldn't stop imagining him in that darkness, watching his father die, knowing he would be next. We're going to find who did this, Ortiz said firmly. The notebook gives us more than we've had in 20 years. The tattoo description, the accent, the fact that he called your husband by name. This person knew them, or knew of them. Elena wiped her eyes, forcing herself back to some semblance of control. What about the camera footage? If he was watching them? If we can recover it, we'll have his face, his voice, everything we need for an identification and conviction. Ortiz closed the notebook carefully. Our tech team is bringing in a specialist who works with degraded digital media. Should be here within the hour. The officer who had brought the notebook cleared his throat. Detective, there's something else. We found marks on the wall, behind where the camera was hidden, carved into the drywall. Looks like initials and a date. MF 1998. Ortiz stood abruptly. The renovation. Someone carved their initials while working on the space. She turned to the officer. Pull every name from the 1998 renovation crew. I want to know everyone who touched that floor, every contractor, every subcontractor, every delivery person. Someone with the initials MF built that chamber, and I guarantee they're in those records. As the officer left, Elena found her voice again. Can I see where they found them? The exact location? Ortiz hesitated. Mrs. Brennan, it's a crime scene, and it's not one thing you want to see. I've been seeing it in my nightmares for 20 years, Elena replied, her voice steadier now. I need to see the truth. After a long moment, Ortiz nodded. They walked through the construction site in silence, portable lights creating harsh shadows across the rubble. The hidden room was on what had been the third floor, Corridor CU, directly above room 247, where Marcus and Tyler had checked in. Elena stared at the geography of it. How close they had been to the room they should have slept in, to the life they should have had. Crime scene technicians worked carefully, photographing and cataloging every inch of the space. Elena watched them lift fingerprints from the walls, collect samples from the mattress, document the scratches that marked her family's desperate attempt to escape. This was Tyler's tomb, Marcus's final resting place, and she had walked past it countless times, had stood in the lobby below, demanding answers while they suffered above her head. Mrs. Brennan, one of the technicians, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes, approached carefully. "We found something else, hidden under a loose floorboard." She held out an evidence bag containing a small object. Elena took it with shaking hands, holding it up to the light. It was a locket, tarnished silver, with an inscription on the back that made her knees weak. "To Elena. Forever yours, M." Marcus's anniversary gift from their 5th year of marriage. He had been wearing it on a chain around his neck, had kept wearing it, even when Elena couldn't remember the last time she had told him she loved him. Inside the locket were 2 photos, barely visible through degradation and moisture. One of Elena on their wedding day, one of Tyler as a baby. Marcus had carried them into that darkness, had clutched them while infection and dehydration slowly killed him. Elena closed her fist around the locket and looked up at the exposed room, at the evidence of suffering and the profound evil required to create such suffering. Someone had done this, had watched a father and son die slowly, had documented their agony, had walked away and left them to rot behind hotel walls while the world moved on. "Find him," she said to Ortiz, her voice hard as desert stone. "Find him and make him answer for every second they spent in that hell." Ortiz met her eyes. "We will. I promise you, Mrs. Brennan, we will." The specialist arrived at 2 in the morning, a woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who looked too young to be an expert in anything but carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades staring at broken technology until it surrendered its secrets. She set up her equipment in a corner of the construction trailer, connecting the recovered hard drive to an array of devices Elena didn't recognize. "The drive is in remarkably good condition, considering the environment," Dr. Tanaka said, not looking up from her work. "Sealed container, moisture protection. Whoever installed this system wanted it to last." Elena stood behind her, unable to sit, unable to do anything but watch, as lines of code scrolled across multiple screens. Ortiz had tried to send her home, had insisted there was nothing she could do here, but Elena had refused. She had missed 20 years of her family's suffering. She wouldn't miss the moment they finally saw the face of the man responsible. Detective Ortiz entered the trailer with a thick file folder, her face tight with exhaustion. And something else. Anger, Elena thought. The kind of focused rage that came from seeing evidence of deliberate cruelty. "We have 3 names from the renovation crew, with the initials MF," Ortiz announced, spreading photographs across the table. "Martin Fisher worked as an electrician during the 1998 renovation. Michael Fontaine, general contractor. And Marcus Fulton, HVAC specialist." She tapped the 3rd photo. "Fulton is interesting. He designed the ventilation systems for the new room configurations. Would have had intimate knowledge of the ductwork, the sealed spaces." Elena studied the photographs. All 3 men were in their 30s at the time of the renovation, which would put them in their 60s now. Fisher had a broad face and receding hairline. Fontaine was thin with wire-rimmed glasses. Fulton had dark hair and what looked like a sleeve of tattoos visible beneath his work shirt. "The tattoo," Elena said, pointing to Fulton's photo. Tyler mentioned a tattoo on his captor's forearm. Compass or clock face. Ortiz pulled out another document, this one a close-up of a man's arm. "This is from Fulton's contractor's license application, 1997. Required photo documentation of identifying marks." The image showed a detailed tattoo of a compass rose, its needle pointing north, surrounded by Roman numerals like a clock. Elena's heart hammered. "That's him. That has to be him. We're bringing him in," Ortiz confirmed. "Problem is, Marcus Fulton dropped off the grid in 2006. No tax returns filed, no credit card activity, no driver's license renewal. Last known address was in North Las Vegas, but the property was sold in 2007. New owners never met him. He ran," Elena said flatly. "After he let them die, he disappeared. Maybe. Or maybe something happened to him." Ortiz pulled out another photograph, this one a crime scene image. "In 2006, there was a fire at a warehouse in Henderson. Suspicious origin, never solved. Property was leased to an LLC that traced back to Marcus Fulton. Fire department found evidence the building had been used for something, but couldn't determine what. By the time they identified Fulton as the leaseholder, he was already gone." Dr. Tanaka made a sound, and this and both women turned to her screens. "I have something," she said quietly. "The first recovered segment. It's not much, and the quality is poor, but it's there." Elena moved closer, Ortiz beside her. The screen showed grainy black and white footage. Timestamp reading October 15, 2004, 21:33. The camera angle looked down into the hidden space, fish-eye distortion warping the edges of the frame. The room was dark, except for a single battery-powered lantern. Marcus and Tyler lay on the filthy mattress, clearly unconscious. As Elena watched, a figure entered the frame from below, climbing up through what must have been an access panel. The person wore dark clothing and a ski mask. Nothing visible, except body shape and movement. Medium build. Efficient, unhurried gestures. The masked figure stood over Marcus and Tyler for a long moment, simply watching them. Then he reached down and touched Tyler's hair, a gesture so gentle and so profoundly wrong that Elena felt her stomach revolt. The figure moved to a corner of the room and adjusted something on the wall. The camera angle shifted slightly, recentering on the mattress. Then he left, dropping back through the access panel, and the footage showed only Marcus and Tyler lying motionless in the dim light. "He was setting up," Ortiz said, her voice tight, making sure the camera would capture everything. Dr. Tanaka typed rapidly. "There's more. Hours of footage. But the file is corrupted in sections. I'm going to need time to piece it together chronologically." "Do it," Ortiz ordered. Every frame could be evidence. Elena couldn't look away from the frozen image on screen. Her husband and son, unconscious and vulnerable, already trapped in the nightmare that would consume them. "How long until you can recover more?" she asked Dr. Tanaka. "I should have the next segment within the hour." "But Mrs. Brennan," Dr. Tanaka turned to face her, and Elena saw genuine compassion in her dark eyes. "This footage is going to be difficult to watch. Extremely difficult. I would recommend you let the detective review it first. Prepare you for what's there." "I've been preparing for 20 years, Elena replied. "Show me everything." The next hour passed in surreal slow motion. Ortiz made phone calls, coordinating with other departments. An APB went out for Marcus Fulton. Though no one expected quick results, on a man who had been ghost for 18 years. Officers began the tedious work of tracking down everyone who had known Fulton, worked with him, might have any idea where he had gone. Elena sat in the corner of the trailer, Marcus's locket clutched in her hand, and waited for the technology to reveal what human evil had stolen from her. At 3:15, Dr. Tanaka spoke again. "I have the next segment. October 16th morning. They're waking up." Elena stood, forcing her legs to hold her weight. On screen, the timestamp read 8:60:47. Marcus stirred first, his movements sluggish, confused. He sat up slowly, one hand going to his head. Then he looked around, and even through the poor quality footage, Elena could see the moment he understood something was terribly wrong. Tyler woke next, and Marcus immediately pulled his son close, looking around the space with growing horror. His mouth moved, speaking words the camera couldn't capture. Tyler started to stand, and Marcus grabbed him, held him back. Smart, Elena thought, testing the space first, not knowing what dangers it might contain. They spent several minutes exploring their prison, Marcus running his hands along the walls, finding the sealed access panel, trying unsuccessfully to pry it open. Tyler discovered the water bottles and bag of granola bars left in one corner. They sat together on the mattress, Marcus's arm around his son, and Elena could see Tyler's shoulders shaking, crying. Marcus pulled him closer, his own face buried in Tyler's hair. Then the access panel opened. The masked figure climbed into the space, and Elena watched Marcus push Tyler behind him, facing their captor, with his arms spread wide, protecting his son with his body. The figure stood perfectly still, watching them. 30 seconds, a minute. Then he reached into a bag and pulled out more water bottles, setting them carefully on the floor. He backed toward the access panel, never turning away from them, and dropped through it. The panel sealed shut. Marcus rushed to it immediately, pounding on the metal, his mouth open in what must have been screams no one could hear. Tyler joined him, both of them hitting the panel with their fists. They did this for what the timestamp showed was 40 minutes, before exhaustion forced them to stop. "He's feeding them," Ortiz said, her voice hollow. "Keeping them alive. For what?" Elena whispered, though she already knew the answer. For the same reason the camera was there. To watch, to document, to savor their suffering. "There's something else in the recovered data," Dr. Tanaka said. "Not video. Audio files, recorded separately, like a diary or log." She pulled up a new window, showing a list of audio files dated throughout October and November 2004. She clicked the first one. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice, Mile, with a slight southern accent Tyler had noted in his journal. "Day 1 of the Brennan Project. Subjects secured and responding well to initial containment. The father is showing appropriate protective behaviors. The son is more valuable than anticipated. This will be educational for all of us." The voice was calm, almost clinical, like a scientist narrating an experiment. Elena felt ice crystallize in her veins. "Educational," Ortiz repeated, her jaw tight. "He's talking about it like a research project." Dr. Tanaka clicked to another file, dated October 20th. The same voice, but with an undercurrent of excitement now. Day 5. The father is weakening faster than projected. Infection from the initial sedation injection site. The son is maintaining better. Interesting how youth provides resilience. I've reduced water rations to observe stress responses. Elena's hands curled into fists. This man had tortured her family methodically, scientifically, while recording every detail of their deterioration. "Find him," she said to Ortiz. "Find Marcus Fulton and bring him to me. By dawn." The command center had transformed into something between a police headquarters and a documentary film archive. Dr. Tanaka had recovered hours of footage, though much of it remained corrupted. What they could see painted a portrait of systematic cruelty that made Elena understand why Ortiz kept suggesting she leave. She didn't leave. The footage showed days passing in that sealed room. Marcus's condition deteriorating as infection spread from his hand up his arm. Tyler trying to care for his father with nothing but bottled water and increasingly sporadic food deliveries. The masked figure appearing at irregular intervals, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes simply standing in the access panel opening and watching them for minutes at a time. On day 7, visible in footage time-stamped October 22nd at 14:20, Marcus Fulton spoke to them for the first time. The audio was muffled, but audible through the camera's microphone. "Mr. Brennan, your son is quite devoted to you. It's touching, really. Reminds me of my own relationship with my father." The southern accent was pronounced, words drawling. "Do you know what my father taught me? That the world is full of people who don't appreciate what they have. People who waste their lives on trivial pursuits, gambling and drinking and throwing money away in cities built on sin." Marcus's response was inaudible, but his body language was clear. He stood between Fulton and Tyler, despite clearly being weak from infection. Fulton continued, seemingly unconcerned by Marcus's defiance. "You brought your boy to Vegas for his birthday, to celebrate him becoming a man by exposing him to this cesspool of vice. What kind of father does that? What kind of father thinks this place has anything worth showing a child?" Elena watched Marcus lunge toward Fulton, watched Fulton step back calmly, and close the access panel before Marcus could reach him. Marcus pounded on the metal until he collapsed, Tyler rushing to his side. "He's justifying it," Ortiz said, quietly. They were alone in the trailer now, just after 6 a.m., other officers outside coordinating the manhunt. Fulton convinced himself they deserved this because of where they chose to vacation. "That's insane," Elena said, her voice flat. "Yes." Ortiz rubbed her eyes, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. "But it's a pattern we see in certain types of offenders. They create elaborate moral frameworks to justify their actions." Fulton saw Vegas as a symbol of societal decay, and anyone who participated in it became a legitimate target in his mind. Elena thought about this, about the randomness of it all. If Marcus had chosen a different destination, if they had stayed one floor higher or lower, if Elena had gone with them instead of nursing her petty anger. So many small choices that had led to 20 years of agony. "The audio logs get worse," Ortiz warned. "Dr. Tanaka pulled them all overnight. I've reviewed them." Fulton talks about previous subjects. Elena's blood went cold. "Previous?" Ortiz pulled out a file, and Elena saw missing persons reports from across the Southwest. Different years, different cities, but all sharing certain characteristics. Single parents with children, couples without local connections, people who had come to Vegas for brief stays and simply never left. 1997, Daniel and Sophie Martinez, father and daughter from Tucson, in Vegas for a quinceañera at the Luxor, disappeared from their hotel room, never found. Ortiz laid out another report. 1999, Catherine Reeves and her son Jordan, Sacramento, here for a weekend, vanished. Another report. 2001, Trevor and Marcus Washington, father and son from Portland, gone. The 1998 renovation, Elena said, understanding flooding through her. He wasn't just working on the hotel. He was building his killing room. We think so. And the warehouse that burned in 2006, Fire investigators found sealed spaces in what remained of the structure. Soundproofed rooms. They thought it might have been used for drug manufacturing, but there was no chemical residue, just those rooms. Ortiz met Elena's eyes. "We think Fulton moved his operation after your husband and son died. The hotel was getting too risky, too many questions about the missing guests." "How many people did he kill?" "We don't know. The audio logs reference at least 7 other projects before Marcus and Tyler. But we only have physical evidence of 3 besides your family. The others—" Ortiz shrugged helplessly. "The desert is vast. If he disposed of bodies there, we might never find them all." A knock on the trailer door interrupted them. A young officer entered, his face pale. "Detective, we found something in the footage from day 12, the day Tyler wrote about in his journal. You need to see this." They followed him to where Dr. Tanaka had set up multiple monitors. She queued up the footage without speaking, her face drawn. The timestamp read, November the 2nd, 2004, 09:35. In the hidden room, Marcus lay on the mattress, clearly in the late stages of sepsis. His arm was swollen to twice its normal size, dark streaks of infection, visible even in the poor lighting. Tyler sat beside him, using torn pieces of his own shirt to try to cool his father's fever with their dwindling water supply. The access panel opened. Fulton climbed in, but this time he wasn't alone. Another figure followed him, smaller, younger. Male, probably late teens or early 20s. He also wore a mask. Elena leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Who is that?" "We don't know," Ortiz said. "But watch." The second figure approached Tyler, who scrambled backward, trying to protect his unconscious father. Fulton stood by the access panel, arms crossed, simply observing. The younger man knelt beside Marcus, and Elena could see Tyler pleading, his mouth forming words. The young man reached out and touched Marcus's infected arm, then looked back at Fulton and shook his head. Fulton climbed back down through the access panel. The second figure followed. Neither had brought water or food. "That's the last time anyone came," Dr. Tanaka said quietly. After that, the footage just shows Tyler alone with Marcus. We can track the progression, see the moment Marcus died based on Tyler's reactions, see Tyler trying to wake him for hours. She paused. Tyler survived another 6 days alone with his father's body before he died of dehydration. Elena couldn't speak, couldn't process the magnitude of her son's suffering. 6 days alone in darkness, with his dead father, knowing he was next, hoping desperately that someone would save him. "The second person is key," Ortiz said, her voice hard. "Fulton had an accomplice, maybe an apprentice. If we can identify him, he might lead us to Fulton. Or he might be another victim," the young officer suggested, "someone Fulton was training or manipulating. Either way, we need to find him." Ortiz turned to Elena. "Mrs. Brennan, I know this is unbearable, but I have to ask. In the footage, in Tyler's descriptions, is there anything familiar? Any detail that might help us identify either Fulton or this second person?" Elena forced herself to think past the horror, to analyze what she had seen, with the same clinical detachment Fulton had used to torture her family. "The second person moves differently than Fulton. Younger, like you said, but also hesitant. When he touched Marcus's arm, it looked like he was checking the infection, not just observing. Maybe medical training?" Ortiz made a note. "Good. What else?" Fulton called Marcus Mr. Brennan. He knew his name, even though Tyler said the man wore a mask. How would he know that, unless he'd researched them, watched them before the abduction? "Hotel registration records," Ortiz said. "Fulton worked in the building. He would have had access to guest lists, could have selected his victims in advance, based on whatever criteria he used. Dr. Tanaka pulled up a new screen. Detective, I've been analyzing the audio file metadata. Most were recorded in the hotel's hidden room, but there are 3 files with different acoustic properties. I think they were recorded somewhere else. She played one of the files, Fulton's voice, but with a subtle echo suggesting a larger space. The warehouse facility is nearly complete. 4 rooms, each with independent life support and monitoring. I can expand operations significantly. The hotel was limiting. Too many variables I couldn't control. This will be purer, more scientific. I can isolate factors, test longer duration scenarios. When was this recorded? Ortiz demanded. Metadata says December 2004, after the Brennans died. Elena stood abruptly. The room suddenly too small, too hot, the air too thin. She stumbled toward the trailer door and out into the cool dawn air. The Strip was waking up in the distance, hotels lighting up for another day of manufactured happiness. 20 years ago, while she had been preparing for her first Christmas without her family, Marcus Fulton had been building a new torture chamber and planning his next abduction. Ortiz followed her outside. Mrs. Brennan? He's still out there, Elena interrupted. For 20 years, I thought at least their deaths had meaning, that revealing what happened might bring closure. But he's alive. He might be doing this to someone else right now. We're going to find him, Ortiz promised. Elena turned to face her. You don't know that. He's been hiding for 18 years. He's smart, careful, patient. He might never surface. He will, Ortiz said with certainty. Because men like Fulton can't stop. Whatever compulsion drives them, it doesn't go away just because they hide. He'll surface, and when he does, we'll be ready. Inside the trailer, Dr. Tanaka called out. Detective, I found something else, a file labeled Conclusion. They rushed back in. On screen was an audio file, dated November 8, 2004. The day after Tyler had died, based on the timeline they had constructed. Dr. Tanaka played it. Fulton's voice was different now. Disappointed, almost petulant. The Brennan project has concluded unsuccessfully. The father's death was premature, compromising the study. The son showed remarkable resilience, but ultimately provided no new insights. This location is compromised. Too many questions about the missing guests. Time to move to the warehouse and refine my methodology. Perhaps children without their parents would provide cleaner data. Less emotional interference. The file ended. In the silence that followed, Elena felt something crystallize inside her. Not just grief anymore, but purpose. For 20 years she had mourned. Now it was time to hunt. I want access to everything, she said to Ortiz. Every file, every piece of footage, every audio log. I've spent 2 decades studying this case. No one knows it better than I do. Let me help find him. Ortiz studied her for a long moment. Mrs. Brennan, you're the victim's family. I can't officially involve you in the investigation. Then, involve me unofficially. I'm not asking for permission, detective. I'm telling you, I'm going to dedicate whatever time I have left to finding Marcus Fulton. You can either work with me or work around me. After a moment, Ortiz nodded. All right. But you follow my lead. And if I say you need to step back, you step back. Understood? Understood. Good. Because we just got a hit on Fulton's credit card, used 3 hours ago, at a gas station in Boulder City. Boulder City was 25 miles southeast of Las Vegas, a small town that had managed to maintain its identity, despite proximity to the Strip. Elena sat in the passenger seat of Detective Ortiz's unmarked sedan as they sped down Highway 93. The morning sun, turning the desert landscape harsh and unforgiving. Behind them, 3 patrol cars followed at a distance. The gas station is on the main road through town, Ortiz explained, one hand on the wheel while she coordinated with other units through her radio. Credit card was used at 3:47 a.m. Clerk remembers the transaction because the card reader flagged it as suspicious, asked for manual approval. The buyer was male, 60s, paid for gas, and bought supplies, water bottles, energy bars, first aid supplies. First aid, Elena repeated. Is he injured? Or preparing for someone who will be? Ortiz's jaw tightened. The purchase pattern matches what we saw in the audio logs. Supplies for keeping someone alive in captivity. Elena's stomach twisted. 20 years of hiding. And Fulton was still hunting, still building his collection of victims. They pulled into the gas station parking lot 15 minutes later. The clerk, a tired-looking man in his 50s, met them at the door. You the detectives who called? I pulled the security footage like you asked. Inside the cramped office behind the register, they watched grainy footage on a small monitor. At 3:47 a.m., a man entered the frame, gray hair, weathered face, the build of someone who had once been muscular, but had softened with age. He wore a denim jacket despite the desert heat, long sleeves covering his arms. The camera angle never captured a clear view of his face, as if he knew exactly where to stand to avoid identification. That's deliberate, Ortiz muttered. He knows where the cameras are. The man gathered his items efficiently, no wasted movement. At the register, he handed over a credit card without speaking. The clerk in the footage swiped it, frowned at his screen, then typed something manually. The man waited patiently, no sign of nervousness or concern. When the transaction completed, he left without taking a receipt. Did he say anything? Ortiz asked the clerk. Not a word. Didn't even make eye contact. Just handed me the card and left. The clerk shifted uncomfortably. There was something off about him, though. The way he moved, real careful and precise. And his eyes, when he glanced at me for that second, they were cold, like he was looking through me, not at me. What about his vehicle? Didn't see. He walked in from the north side of the lot, where the cameras don't reach. Must have parked on the street. Ortiz turned to Elena. He's close. Within 25 miles of Boulder City, probably. That's why he risked using the card. He needed supplies and couldn't travel far to get them. The warehouse, Elena said. The one that burned in 2006. Where was it located? Ortiz pulled out her phone, scrolling through files. Henderson. But that building was completely destroyed. Nothing left but foundation. What if he rebuilt somewhere nearby? Somewhere isolated enough that no one would notice. Ortiz made a call. I need property records for Henderson and Boulder City area, searching for properties purchased or leased between 2006 and present under the name Marcus Fulton or any associated LLCs. She paused, listening. Yes, I'll hold. Elena watched the security footage loop again. Something about the man's movements bothered her, a familiarity she couldn't place. Then she saw it. When he reached for the credit card, his jacket sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the edge of a tattoo on his forearm. The compass rose Tyler had described 20 years ago. That's him, she said. I can see the tattoo. Ortiz leaned in, squinting at the screen. Barely visible. But you're right. We can enhance this, use it as confirmation. She held up a finger as the person on her phone returned. Yes, I'm here. What did you find? Elena watched Ortiz's expression shift from concentration to grim satisfaction. 2 properties, Ortiz said, hanging up. Both purchased through an LLC called Compass Holdings in 2007. One, the U is a residential property in Boulder City, small house on the edge of town. The other is an industrial lot in Henderson, listed as storage facility. Both have the same mailing address, registered to a management company that doesn't exist anymore. He's using one of them, Elena said with certainty. Or both. We'll need to approach carefully. If he's got someone captive, any sign of police could make him kill them immediately. Ortiz was already coordinating with the patrol cars. We'll split up. Half the team takes the Boulder City house. Half takes the Henderson property. I'll lead Boulder City. You stay. I'm coming with you. Mrs. Brennan. Detective, for 20 years I've lived with not knowing, with imagining the worst but never having confirmation. I watched footage of my family dying. I listened to their killer describe it like a science project. I'm not sitting in a parking lot while you confront him. Ortiz studied her face, then nodded curtly. You stay behind me at all times. You don't engage. You observe only. Clear? Clear. The Boulder City property was on Elm Street, a narrow road that dead-ended at the desert. The house was small and nondescript, beige stucco, with desert landscaping and no signs of recent activity. Windows were covered with heavy curtains. A detached garage sat behind the main structure, its door closed. Ortiz positioned officers around the perimeter, while she and Elena approached the front door with two other detectives. The wood was weathered but solid, locks industrial grade, not a house someone lived in casually. This was a fortress. Ortiz knocked, announcing their presence. Las Vegas Police Department. We have a warrant to search these premises. Silence. She knocked again, louder. Marcus Fulton, this is the police. Open the door. Still nothing. Breach it, Ortiz ordered. Two officers moved forward with a battering ram. 3 strikes, and the door splintered inward. Ortiz entered first, weapon drawn, calling out warnings as she cleared each room. Elena followed at a distance, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The house was sparsely furnished. Living room with a single chair facing a television. Kitchen with minimal supplies. Bedroom with a neatly made bed and nothing personal on display. It looked like a way station, somewhere to sleep between other activities. But the garage was different. When they opened the connecting door, Elena understood immediately what they had found. The space had been converted into a workshop, but not for building or repairing anything normal. One wall was covered with photographs, dozens of them, showing people who didn't know they were being watched. Families on vacation. Single parents with children. Couples holding hands. All of them in Vegas, captured at various hotels and casinos. Hunting grounds, Ortiz said quietly. He was selecting targets. Elena moved closer to the photographs, scanning faces for anyone she recognized. In the corner, she found them. Marcus and Tyler, photographed at the Venetian Palace lobby on October 15, 2004. They were smiling, Tyler pointing at something off camera while Marcus laughed. The last moment of their normal lives, captured by the man who would destroy them. Detective, one of the officers called from the back of the garage. You need to see this. Behind a workbench, they had found a laptop, old but functional. The screen was locked, but papers beside it showed lists of names and dates. Elena recognized some from the missing persons reports Ortiz had shown her. All of Fulton's victims, meticulously documented, and at the bottom of the most recent page, a new entry dated 3 days ago. Sarah Chen, 34, son Michael Chen, 12, staying at Luxor, room 2847, target acquisition scheduled October 20th, 2024. Today's date. Ortiz grabbed her radio. All units, we have an active threat. Marcus Fulton was targeting a mother and son at the Luxor, room 2847. Get hotel security to that room immediately. I want eyes on Sarah Chen and her son right now. She turned to Elena. The Henderson property. That's where he takes them. That's where he is. They ran for the cars, sirens already wailing as the convoy raced north toward Henderson. Elena gripped the door handles. Ortiz drove with controlled urgency, radio crackling with updates. Hotel security had reached room 2847. The door was closed, do not disturb sign hanging from the handle. No response to knocking. Breach protocol authorized. Ortiz commanded, "Get in that room." Static, then a voice. "Room is empty. Beds haven't been slept in. Luggage is here, you, but the occupants are gone." Elena's blood went cold. He had them. While they were searching his house, Fulton had already taken his newest victims. "Henderson property? What's the address?" Elena demanded. Ortiz read it off from her GPS. "Industrial Park, Lot 47. 10 minutes out." "He's there," Elena said, "with Sarah and Michael Chen, and we're running out of time." The industrial park was abandoned, buildings in various states of decay. Lot 47 sat at the far end, a low concrete structure with no windows and a single reinforced door. A white van was parked outside, rental company logo on the side. Ortiz parked a block away, coordinating with SWAT who were en route. "We wait for backup," she said firmly. "If he's in there with hostages, if we wait, they die." Elena opened her door. "You said yourself, men like Fulton can't stop. He's probably already started whatever he does to them." "Mrs. Brennan, I gave you specific orders." But Elena was already walking toward the building, propelled by 20 years of grief and rage, and the desperate need to save someone from the fate her family had suffered. Behind her, she heard Ortiz curse and follow, along with the other officers. They approached the reinforced door carefully. Ortiz tried the handle, locked, but she could hear something from inside, muffled sounds, crying. "Breach," she ordered. This door was stronger than the houses had been. It took 6 strikes with the ram before it gave way, metal shrieking as it tore from its frame. They poured inside, weapons drawn, into a scene from Elena's worst nightmares made real. The space was divided into rooms, each with reinforced walls and heavy doors. 3 were empty, doors hanging open, to show spaces like the one where Marcus and Tyler had died. Mattresses on the floor, scratch marks on the walls, evidence of suffering layered over years. The 4th room was sealed shut. Ortiz moved to it immediately, calling out, "Police, we're coming in." She threw the bolt and pulled the door open. Inside, a woman and young boy huddled together on a stained mattress, both clearly drugged but conscious. Sarah Chen and her son Michael, alive but terrified. In the corner of the room stood a camera on a tripod, its red recording light glowing in the darkness. "Get them out," Ortiz commanded, officers rushing in to help the victims. "Where's Fulton?" Elena turned slowly, scanning the space. The main room was empty, except for a desk covered in monitoring equipment. 4 screens showed feeds from the sealed rooms. A filing cabinet stood against one wall. And in the back corner, another door. This one wasn't reinforced. It was ordinary, almost residential in appearance. She walked toward it, ignoring Ortiz's sharp command to stop. Her hand closed on the knob and turned, unlocked. The room beyond was small, almost a closet, and inside, hanging from a beam, was Marcus Fulton. He had been dead for hours, body already starting to stiffen, in his hand a piece of paper. Elena took it with shaking fingers, unfolding it to read the neat handwriting. "To whoever finds this, I have documented everything. 23 subjects, over 27 years. Every moment recorded, every response cataloged. The data is stored in multiple locations, Insurance against being forgotten. You'll find the locations listed in my files. My work was important, necessary even. The world needs to understand what people truly are when all comfort is stripped away. I regret only that I couldn't complete this final study, but time caught up to me, as it catches up to everyone. Marcus Fulton. Elena stared at the note, at the body, at the final escape of a monster who had destroyed so many lives. He had cheated justice, cheated accountability, chosen his own end rather than face his victims. Mrs. Brennan. Ortiz stood in the doorway, her face grim. We found his files, names, dates, locations. He buried them in the desert, most of them. We'll be able to give families closure at least. Find their loved ones and bring them home. It's not enough, Elena said, her voice hollow. 23 families, 23 lives ended for his curiosity. And he just gets to leave on his own terms. I know. But we saved Sarah and Michael Chen. Because of you. Because you wouldn't give up on this case, they're going to survive. That has to count for something. Elena looked back at Fulton's body one last time, then turned away. Ortiz was right. It wasn't justice, not really. But it was an ending. Finally, after 20 years, it was an ending. The Henderson facility became a crime scene that would take months to fully process. Forensics teams worked carefully through each room, documenting evidence of Fulton's decades of crimes. The hard drives they recovered contained hundreds of hours of footage, digital monuments to suffering, that would now serve as evidence in a case where the perpetrator would never stand trial. Elena sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket. Despite the desert heat, she watched officers escort Sarah Chen and her son, Michael, to another ambulance, both of them ambulatory but shaken. Sarah kept Michael close, one arm around his shoulders, moving as if through a dream. Elena understood that walk, that floating sensation, when reality became too heavy to fully process. Detective Ortiz approached, exhaustion etched deep in her face. Paramedics want to check you out. You've been exposed to a traumatic scene. I've been living in a traumatic scene for 20 years, Elena replied. This is just the first time I've seen it with my own eyes, instead of my imagination. Ortiz sat beside her on the ambulance bumper. We found the files Fulton referenced in his note, detailed documentation of every victim, including disposal locations. The FBI is coordinating with multiple jurisdictions to begin recovery operations. 23 families, Elena said. 23 sets of people who went through what I went through. You're going to meet some of them. The FBI wants to establish a victim support network, and they've asked if you'd be willing to participate. You don't have to decide now. Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last 12 hours was fading, leaving behind a weariness that went bone deep. There's something else, Ortiz continued carefully. The second person from the footage, the younger man who was with Fulton in 2004. We found references to him in Fulton's files. Name is Daniel Cortez. He was 19 in 2004, working as a custodian at the Venetian Palace. Elena looked up sharply. You found him. Found what happened to him. According to Fulton's notes, Cortez became uncomfortable with the projects after your husband and son. He wanted out. Fulton couldn't allow that. Couldn't risk Cortez going to police. Ortiz paused. Cortez's body was one of the ones recovered from the desert burial sites. Died in 2005, probably shortly after Fulton moved operations to the warehouse. So Fulton killed his accomplice to protect himself. It appears so. Though accomplice might not be the right word. Cortez's family reported him missing in 2005. We're pulling his background now, but preliminary information suggests Fulton may have been grooming him, manipulating a vulnerable kid who needed money and father figure. Ortiz shook her head. The more we uncover, the more victims we find. An officer approached with an evidence bag containing Marcus's locket, recovered from Elena's possession during the chaos. Mrs. Brennan, we'll need to log this as evidence, but I wanted to make sure you knew we'd return it to you once the case is formally closed. Elena took the bag, looking at the tarnished silver through clear plastic. How long? Could be a year or more. Even with Fulton dead, we need to build a complete case file. Document everything for the record. A year, Elena repeated. After 20 years of waiting, what was one more? She handed the bag back. Keep it safe. The officer nodded and left. Ortiz's radio crackled, summoning her to the facility. I need to coordinate with forensics. Will you be all right? Yes. I think I need to talk to Sarah Chen, if she's able. I'll arrange it. 20 minutes later, Elena approached the ambulance where Sarah Chen sat with Michael. The boy was asleep now, sedated by paramedics, his head resting in his mother's lap. Sarah looked up as Elena approached, and something passed between them. Recognition of shared trauma, the instant connection of people who had stared into the same abyss. You're Elena Brennan, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. The detective told me. Your family? God, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for what happened to you and Michael, Elena replied. But you're alive. You're going to recover from this. Are we? Sarah's voice was hollow. How do we recover from being drugged and locked in a room by a monster? How do I explain to my son what happened when I don't understand it myself? Elena sat beside her carefully. You take it one day at a time. Some days you'll be angry. Some days you'll be terrified. Some days you'll feel guilty for surviving when others didn't. All of that is normal. You've lived with this for 20 years. Does it get easier? Elena considered lying, offering false comfort. But Sarah deserved truth. It gets different. The acute pain fades into chronic ache. You learn to build a life around the void instead of trying to fill it. And eventually, you find purpose in making sure what happened matters. Sarah stroked Michael's hair, her hand trembling. The detective said you saved us, that you figured out where we were. I just followed the evidence. The police did the hard work. No, Sarah said firmly. The detective told me you've spent 20 years investigating your own family's disappearance, that you never gave up. If you had, if you'd moved on like everyone told you to, Michael and I would be... She couldn't finish the sentence. Elena reached out and took her hand. You're alive. That's what matters now. Focus on that. They sat in silence for a moment, watching activity swirl around them. Finally, Sarah spoke again. What will you do now? Now that you know what happened? It was the question Elena had been avoiding. For 20 years, finding answers had been her purpose, her reason for getting up each morning. Now she had those answers, had seen the room where her family died, had watched footage of their final days. The investigation that had defined her life was over. I don't know, she admitted. I'll help with the recovery efforts, give statements, testify if needed. Beyond that, she trailed off, staring at the desert horizon. I'll figure out who I am when I'm not searching anymore. Ortiz returned, her expression grave. Mrs. Brennan, there's someone here who needs to speak with you. FBI agent, who's coordinating the multi-jurisdictional response. Elena followed her to where a woman in a dark suit stood conferring with other federal agents. She was in her 40s, professional and composed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Mrs. Brennan, I'm Special Agent Victoria Marsh with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. I've been reviewing Marcus Fulton's files, and I need to discuss something sensitive with you. Elena's stomach tightened. What is it? Fulton kept extensive records, as you know, including detailed notes on each of his victims, psychological profiles, observations. Marsh pulled out a tablet, swiping through documents. In his notes about your husband and son, he made several references to your work schedule, your routines, even specific arguments you and Marcus had before the trip. He was watching our house? Elena felt violated all over again. More than that, he had help. Marsh turned the tablet to show Elena a photograph. A woman in her 30s, dark hair, professional attire. Recognize her? Elena stared at the image, memory clicking into place. That was my assistant at work, Patricia Chen. She left the company in 2005, said she was moving to California. Patricia Chen is Marcus Fulton's daughter from his first marriage. She changed her name after her parents divorced when she was 12, went to live with her mother. But she maintained contact with her father. Marsh's expression was grim. According to the files, she provided him with information about you, helped him select Marcus and Tyler as targets. The world tilted. Elena grabbed the edge of the desk for support. No, that's not possible. She was my friend. We worked together for 3 years. She was embedded in your life, specifically to provide her father with intelligence. The fights you had with Marcus before the trip, your work schedule that prevented you from going with them, even which hotel they chose. All of it was information Patricia fed to Fulton. Where is she now? We don't know yet, but we're looking. If she was complicit in her father's crimes, she'll face charges. Elena thought about Patricia. The lunches they'd shared, the conversations about work and life, and mundane frustrations. All of it a lie. A performance designed to destroy Elena's family. The betrayal cut deeper than Fulton's crime somehow, because Patricia had looked her in the eye and pretended friendship while orchestrating murder. Find her, Elena said, her voice cold. Find her and make sure she answers for what she did. We will, Marsh promised. And Mrs. Brennan, I know this is another violation, another layer of trauma, but I wanted you to hear it from me directly, rather than discover it during the investigation. Elena nodded numbly and walked away, needing space, needing air. She found herself at the edge of the industrial park, staring out at the desert where Fulton had buried his victims. Somewhere out there, Marcus and Tyler rested in unmarked graves. Soon, recovery teams would bring them home. She would finally be able to bury them properly, give them the funerals they deserved. But the cost of that closure kept mounting. Not just her family's suffering, but the years of manipulation, the violation of her privacy, the betrayal by someone she had trusted. Every answer revealed new wounds. Ortiz appeared beside her. Agent Marsh told me about Patricia Chen. For 3 years, I worked beside the woman who helped kill my family. I confided in her, trusted her. Elena's voice was flat, emotionless. How do you recover from that? The same way you recover from everything else. One day at a time. Ortiz was quiet for a moment. We're going to catch her. We've already flagged her passport, frozen her accounts, issued federal warrants. She can't hide forever. But she's hiding now, while her father's victims are being dug up from the desert. While families are learning their loved ones are dead. Elena turned to face Ortiz. She knew what he was doing, and she helped him. That makes her just as guilty. Yes, it does. And she'll face justice for it. Elena wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that the system would work, that evil would be punished, that meaning could be extracted from senseless tragedy. But 20 years of disappointment had taught her that justice was rarely clean or complete. Still, standing at the edge of that desert, with the sun setting behind her and police lights flashing in the distance, Elena felt something shift. Not closure exactly, not peace, but a sense that the long vigil was finally ending. The questions that had consumed her life had been answered, however horrifically. The man who had killed her family was dead, and the woman who had helped him would be found. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And for now, after 20 years of nothing, something felt like progress. The recovery operation began at dawn, 2 days after they found Fulton's body. Elena stood with other families at the edge of the cordoned area, watching forensic anthropology teams work with ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. The desert had kept its secrets for decades, but now those secrets were being systematically unearthed. Agent Marsh had been right about the scope. 23 burial sites, spread across a 5-mile radius, each marked in Fulton's meticulous records, with GPS coordinates and victim identification. The FBI had brought in specialists from across the country, treating it like a mass casualty event. In a way, Elena supposed, that's exactly what it was. Beside her stood Rebecca Martinez, whose father Daniel and sister Sophie had disappeared in 1997. She was 40 now, had spent half her life wondering what happened to them. When the FBI contacted her 3 days ago, she had flown in from Tucson immediately. "I always knew they were dead," Rebecca said quietly, watching the team's work. "But knowing and having proof are different things. Being able to bury them, having a place to visit." Her voice broke. "It sounds morbid, but it's a relief." Elena understood. She had felt the same way when forensic teams confirmed they had located Marcus and Tyler's remains. The grief was just as heavy, but at least now it had a direction, a focus. She could plan a funeral instead of endlessly searching. Other families arrived throughout the morning. Catherine Reeves's elderly mother, supported by 2 adult children who had been young when their brother Jordan disappeared. The Washington family from Portland, 3 siblings who had lost their father Trevor and brother Marcus in 2001, all of them drawn to this desolate stretch of desert by the terrible need to witness, to confirm, to finally know. A grief counselor provided by the FBI moved among them, offering support and information. Elena had declined counseling for herself, but watched others accept it gratefully. Everyone processed trauma differently. Some needed to talk through it immediately. Elena had always been more internal, working through pain in private, before she could discuss it with others. Ortiz approached with update tablets, showing the latest recovery information. "We've confirmed 12 sites so far. The work is slow because we need to preserve evidence, document everything for potential prosecution of Patricia Chen." "Any word on her location?" Elena asked. "She crossed into Mexico 4 days ago, using a fake passport. Mexican authorities are cooperating, but she could be anywhere by now. The FBI has assets tracking her, but—" Ortiz shrugged helplessly. "She's had years to prepare for this possibility. Probably has multiple identities, safe houses, resources we don't know about." Elena had expected this. Patricia Chen had spent years helping her father, had access to all his planning and paranoia. She would have prepared escape routes, backup identities, ways to disappear completely. The question was whether she could maintain that disappearance indefinitely, or whether the pressure of being hunted would force a mistake. "We'll find her," Ortiz said, but even she sounded less certain than before. "Maybe," Elena replied. "Or maybe she's the one piece of this that never gets resolved. Maybe that's how it works. We save some people, catch some criminals, and others slip away. You've become remarkably philosophical about this. Not philosophical, realistic. Elena watched the forensic teams carefully excavating another site. For 20 years, I told myself that if I just found answers, if I just understood what happened, the pain would stop. But that was a fantasy. The pain doesn't stop. It just changes shape. Rebecca Martinez rejoined them, her face streaked with tears. They found them. My father and Sophie. The agent showed me. They showed me evidence that confirmed it. She pressed a hand to her mouth. 27 years. She would have been 42 now. Had her own family, maybe. Instead, she's been here all this time. Elena pulled her into an embrace, and Rebecca collapsed against her, sobbing. Other families nearby moved closer, creating an instinctive circle of shared grief. These people who had never met before, connected by the actions of a monster and the long years of not knowing. As the sun climbed higher, the desert heat became oppressive. The FBI set up shade structures and brought water for the families. Elena found herself in conversation with various people, sharing stories about their loved ones, the investigations that had gone nowhere, the years of hoping against hope for different outcomes. Jordan Reeves had been 9 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs and space. Trevor Washington had been a veteran, decorated Marine, who struggled with civilian life but adored his son. The Martinez family had come to Vegas to celebrate Sophie's quinceañera, a milestone she never reached. Each victim had been a complete person, with dreams and quirks, and people who loved them. Fulton had reduced them to subjects in his twisted experiments, but their families held on to the fullness of who they had been. Late in the afternoon, Agent Marsh gathered the families for an update. We've recovered remains from 18 sites. The remaining 5 are proving more challenging due to terrain and decomposition, but we're confident we'll complete recovery within the week. Once all remains are secured, we'll begin the identification process using dental records and DNA. What about bringing charges against Patricia Chen? Someone asked. Even if Fulton is dead, she should face justice. We agree completely, Marsh said. We've filed federal charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. She's on the FBI's most wanted list. International warrants have been issued. We will find her. Elena wasn't sure she believed that, but she appreciated the commitment. At least the effort was being made. Resources were being devoted to catching one of the people responsible. As families began to leave for the evening, Elena remained behind. She walked to the area where Marcus and Tyler had been found, marked now with evidence flags and careful excavation. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple that reminded her of that October 20 years ago. Detective Ortiz appeared beside her. You should go home, get some rest. They'll continue working tomorrow. I know. I just needed a moment. Elena looked at the excavation site, imagining her family beneath the sand all these years. I keep thinking about that last note in Tyler's journal. How he said Marcus believed I would find them. And I did. Just 20 years too late to save them. You saved Sarah and Michael Chen. If you hadn't pursued this, hadn't refused to give up, they would be in the ground too. That has to count for something. It does, but it doesn't erase the 20 years Marcus and Tyler spent dead while I searched for them. Ortiz was quiet for a moment. I've worked cold cases for 5 years now. I've seen families destroyed by not knowing, and families destroyed by knowing. There's no good outcome when someone you love is murdered. But closure, real closure, comes from deciding that the person who died wouldn't want you to stop living, from honoring their memory by building something meaningful, from the grief. You sound like a grief counselor. I've been to enough of them. comes with the job. Ortiz managed a small smile. What I'm saying is, you've spent 20 years in suspended animation. Now you know the truth. As horrible as it is, you know. So the question becomes, what does Elena Brennan do next? Elena didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as she walked back to her car, she thought about the other families she had met today. People who had suffered the same uncertainty, the same endless wondering. Maybe there was something she could do with that shared experience. Some way to help others navigate the impossible landscape of violent loss. It wasn't much. It wasn't justice, not really. But it was purpose, and purpose was what she needed now. 3 days later, Elena received a call from Agent Marsh. We found Patricia Chen. She's in custody. Elena gripped the phone. Where? Mexico City. She tried to board a flight to Argentina, using another fake passport. But facial recognition flagged her. Mexican federal police took her into custody. She'll be extradited within the week. Does she know about her father? Yes. She claims she had nothing to do with his crimes, that she lost contact with him years ago, and knew nothing about his activities. Marsh's voice was hard. We have evidence that contradicts every part of that story. She's going to face the full weight of federal prosecution. After hanging up, Elena sat in her apartment, surrounded by the boxes that had defined her life for 2 decades. Police reports, newspaper clippings, notes from private investigators. 20 years of obsession, contained in cardboard and manila folders. Slowly, methodically, she began to pack them away. Not throwing them out, but putting them aside. The case wasn't closed, not officially. There would be trials and testimonies and years of legal proceedings. But the active investigation, the desperate searching, that was over. She had her answers. Finally, terribly, she had her answers. And now, she had to figure out how to live with them. 6 months later, Elena stood in the cemetery where Marcus and Tyler had finally been laid to rest. The headstone was simple, dignified, with their names and dates and a line from a poem Marcus had loved. The light of memory follows us still. Fresh flowers sat in the holder, replaced weekly. Elena came every Saturday morning, a new ritual to replace the old ones, of searching and hoping. She told them about her life, the small details that seemed important, how she had started volunteering with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, how she had connected with other families who had lost loved ones to violence and created a support network for those navigating cold cases. The trial of Patricia Chen was scheduled to begin in 3 months. Elena would testify about their working relationship, about the trust Patricia had violated. She wasn't looking forward to it, to facing the woman who had smiled at her while planning her family's destruction. But she would do it. For Marcus and Tyler, for all of Fulton's victims, she would stand in that courtroom and tell the truth. Sarah Chen and her son Michael were recovering slowly. Elena had visited them twice, watching Michael laugh at something on television and feeling grateful that he still could. That trauma hadn't completely destroyed his capacity for joy. Sarah had started therapy and was working toward returning to normal life. It would take years, but they would make it. The desert had surrendered all of Fulton's victims. 23 families had closure now, graves to visit, services to hold. The FBI had recovered thousands of hours of footage documenting his crimes, evidence that would ensure Patricia Chen spent the rest of her life in prison. Justice, such as it was, would be served. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca Martinez, checking in, as she did every few days. They had formed a bond in the desert, 2 women who understood each other's pain in ways no one else could. Rebecca was writing a book about her family's experience, trying to make meaning from tragedy. Elena had agreed to contribute a chapter. As she turned to leave the cemetery, Elena caught sight of Detective Ortiz approaching. They had stayed in touch, occasional phone calls and coffee meetings, where they talked about the case and life, and the strange aftermath of achieving what you've spent decades pursuing. "Thought I might find you here," Ortiz said, falling into step beside her. "I wanted to tell you in person. The forensics team finished processing all of Fulton's equipment. We found something we thought you should see." She handed Elena a USB drive. "It's video from the hidden room, but not of your family. It's footage from before October 15th, 2004. Fulton testing the camera angles, making sure everything worked. There's a moment where he lifts his mask, just for a second. We see his face clearly." Elena turned the drive over in her hands. "Why would I want to see that?" "Because in that moment, he looks ordinary. Just a man checking equipment. No different from any contractor doing a job. And I think that's important to remember. Evil doesn't announce itself with horns and fangs. It looks normal. It blends in." Ortiz paused. "But it also means we can recognize it, stop it, save people. Like we saved Sarah and Michael." Elena pocketed the drive, not sure if she would ever watch it. Knowing Fulton's face didn't change what he had done. But Ortiz was right about something. Understanding how monsters hide in plain sight was the key to finding them before they destroyed more lives. They walked through the cemetery together, past rows of headstones marking other endings, other stories. The morning sun was warm, the desert air clear. Somewhere in the distance, children played in a park, their laughter carrying on the breeze. "I've been thinking about what you said in the desert," Elena said. "About building something meaningful from grief. I want to do more than just volunteer. I want to start an organization specifically for cold case families. Advocacy, support, resources to keep investigations active. That's ambitious. I have 20 years of experience and nothing but time. And I can't be the only person who needs purpose after closure." Ortiz smiled. "You'll need help, legal advice, nonprofit registration, funding. I know people who can assist with that. I'd appreciate it." They reached the cemetery parking lot, where their cars sat in adjacent spaces. Before getting in, Ortiz turned to Elena. "For what it's worth, I think Marcus and Tyler would be proud of what you're doing, turning their tragedy into something that helps others." Elena looked back at their headstone, visible in the distance. "I hope so. It's all I can think to do. It's more than most people manage." Ortiz opened her car door, then paused. "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Brennan. The world needs people like you, but you need to save some energy for your own healing." After Ortiz left, Elena sat in her car for several minutes, looking at the cemetery. 20 years she had waited for this. 20 years of hoping for different answers, better outcomes, miracles that never came. And now she was here, on the other side of knowing, trying to figure out how to build a life from the wreckage. It wasn't the ending she had wanted. Marcus and Tyler were still dead, still lost to her. Patricia Chen would go to prison, but that wouldn't return a single day of the life they should have had. Justice was cold comfort compared to what had been taken. But there was Sarah Chen and her son, alive, because Elena had refused to give up. There were 23 families who could finally bury their dead with dignity. There were future victims who might be saved, because Fulton's methods were now known, studied, added to the database of how predators operate. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Elena started her car and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the cemetery behind. She had a meeting scheduled with lawyers about nonprofit incorporation, then coffee with Rebecca to discuss the book project, then dinner with Sarah Chen continuing the friendship that had formed from shared trauma. A life, in other words. Not the life she had planned or wanted, but a life nonetheless, built from grief and determination, and the stubborn insistence that what happened to her family would mean something beyond random cruelty. As she drove through Henderson toward home, Elena caught a glimpse of the Vegas Strip in the distance, that glittering monument to excess and entertainment. The city that had taken everything from her, but also given her purpose. 20 years ago, Marcus and Tyler had driven toward those lights, full of excitement and anticipation. They never made it home, but Elena had. She had survived the 20-year nightmare of not knowing, had stared into the abyss of what actually happened, and Emma looked away, had found the strength to keep living when everything inside her wanted to stop. The light of memory follows us still, the headstone read. Marcus had loved that line, had quoted it whenever remembering his own father who died young. Memory as illumination, as guide, as the thread connecting past to present. Elena would follow that thread forward now, would let memory light her path without letting it trap her in darkness, would honor Marcus and Tyler not by endless mourning, but by living fully, purposefully, in the world they had been stolen from. It wasn't the ending she wanted, but it was the ending she had, and she would make it mean something. Behind her, the cemetery faded in the rearview mirror. Ahead, the city sprawled across the desert basin, alive with possibility and danger in equal measure. Elena Brennan drove toward it, with eyes wide open, ready for whatever came next. The search was over. The living was just beginning.